Hace solo unos minutos terminamos de hablar con Mike Flanagan, director de El Juego de Gerald, Doctor Sueño y, si todo se da como esperamos, la futura serie de la Torre Oscura. ¿Querés saber qué nos contó hoy acá en Cosas Necesarias? Bueno, ¿viste esa noticia que te contamos en una anterior Cosas Necesarias sobre que finalmente se iba a hacer la serie de la Torre Oscura y que nosotros lo sabíamos hace un año y que no podíamos decir nada? Y la otra cosa que no te podíamos contar es que ya habíamos gestionado para poder charlar con Mike Flanagan un poquito sobre sus trabajos junto a Stephen King, ¿no? Tanto El Juego de Gerald como Doctor Sueño como La Torre Oscura. Logramos mechar un poquito otros proyectos que no terminaron de salir. Nos contó algunas cosas que no sabíamos de los proyectos anteriores. Sí. También nos contó bastantes cosas de lo que sería La Torre Oscura, inclusive ciertas, definiciones que nos entusiasmaron un montón.
La entrevista que estás por ver, de más está decir, tiene bastantes spoilers. Así que, si no leíste estas obras y no te querés enterar de nada, este es el momento en donde encerrás el video y volvés apenas las termines.
Así que sin más, te invitamos a ver lo que charlamos con el gran Mike Flanagan. Hi, Mike. Thank you very much for being here with me, for giving us your time for this interview.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
It's for us, it's such a great opportunity. I'm not exaggerating when I say that your first adaptation with Stephen King, which is Gerald's Game, of course, it was one for me, one of the most grateful surprises in terms of Stephen King adaptations. On a personal level, I always thought that the book was simply impossible to be adapted, and you proved me wrong from the very first scene. I wonder which were the challenge you faced to adapt this book, because it was really a difficult book to adapt.
You know, I agree with you. I also thought it was impossible to adapt it for a very long time. I mean, the biggest challenge with Gerald's Game is just how much of that wonderful novel takes place entirely in Jesse's mind, and making it cinematic, trying to find a way to make it interesting visually when it's really just a woman handcuffed in place for pretty much the whole story. That was the challenge, and how to handle the different voices that King had created to show us the different personalities and sides of her, and how to try to simplify that so that there'd always be one or two faces that the audience was reacting to. But yeah, it was an incredible honor that he trusted me with that story, because it was, I think, so difficult. And I was terrified of messing it up every day of that one. You know, I think a lot of the success of that movie too is Carla Gugino makes it work. And if we had a different actor, I don't know, I could have done everything else the same and it wouldn't have worked without an actor as strong as Carla.
I really got into her mind and said, okay, this movie is getting on my nerves. I'm having a great time, but the worst time. And the famous scene with the hand, oh my God. But I just saw that my wife doesn't like to watch horror movies. So it's kind of, usually when there is a new Stephen King adaptation, I watch it all myself. But after I saw that one, I called her and said, okay, tonight we're going to watch this one. It has a very tough scene to watch, but I think you'll like it. And yes, she liked it a lot. Do you Stephen King like it, right? Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Did Stephen King like it?
He did. He liked it a lot, which was an incredible moment for me when he finally responded to the movie and said how much he enjoyed it, and that's why Dr. Sleep happened, and that's why the Dark Tower happened. So it's all. You can trace it all back to those handcuffs, that started the whole thing.
Yeah, you probably know the story that when Stephen King was researching for that book, he took Joe Hill to the bed, uncuffed it, and Tabitha saw them and said, okay, I don't want to know what's going on here.
I love that. I love that. Mm-hmm.
2 years later, we got Dr. Sleep. I remember reading an interview that you watched The Shining when you were young at a slumber party, and nothing was ever the same. I mean, it must have been quite a thrill to direct that movie, that story that so many of us considered a sequel to The Shining. Did you have a plan B if Stephen King didn't like the idea of the hotel being abandoned, but very much the same alive instead of burnt down?
If he didn't like that, I wouldn't have made the movie. Was kind of where we were. That was how I thought the story wanted to be told. I really wanted to try to find a way to kind of bring the King world of The Shining and the Kubrick world of The Shining back together. But if he didn't give his blessing for that, I couldn't have kept going. I was also terrified of messing that movie up at every single step. And the idea that Stephen King would watch Dr. Sleep and react to it the way he reacted to The Shining and say, I am not happy with this adaptation, that would have killed me. It would have just completely crushed me. So I didn't really have a plan B. I suppose I would have tried to do it the way he did it in the book, and then just say, okay, well, if it's not this overlook, then there's no overlook in the story. We'll just let it be burned down. I don't think the movie would have worked as well as I hope it worked if we had to do it that way. I felt like a kid being allowed to play inside the Overlook Hotel as I pictured it. You know, I think that's what it is I don't believe that Kubrick's movie is a good adaptation of the novel, but I think it's a brilliant masterpiece of cinema. And when I was reading Dr. Sleep, and when I pictured Dick Halloran, or I pictured the lobby of the Overlook, you know, I pictured, it's the visual language of it. You know, when you imagine the bar and you imagine Grady. It's, for me anyway, the visual language was all Kubrick's. The story that I preferred was King's. I thought the heart and what he did with Jack Torrance, you know, that Kubrick had kind of shoved aside when he made his adaptation. I thought there must be a way to pull all of it back and to try to do Dr. Sleep properly, but also celebrate the cinematic achievement that Kubrick's film undeniably is, and give Steve the ending to The Shining that Kubrick changed, you know, and that was kind of it seemed like such an amazing opportunity. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity to play with all of those specific things and try to get them together. And I remember saying to him, you know, I want to keep the hotel intact and use the Kubrick visuals. And he said, no. And I said, well, but let me explain. And I went through the explanation and said, you know, I pitched the scene where Danny is at the bar and the bartender is his father. And that was when Steve said, okay, do it. And then I said, and I'm going to change the ending of Dr. Sleep. But before you get upset, I think we're just going to do the ending of The Shining. And, you know, Danny gets Jack's arc. He gets his final moments and that redemptive sacrifice. And he was supportive. And if he hadn't been, I think I would have walked away from it and tried to find another project to do with him that would have been less fraught. But I was really happy with what we did, and he really loved what we did, and that led us to, you know, to the big ones. So yeah.
I must say that the scene in the bar, I think it's one of the most powerful scenes of the movie. And we're talking about a movie that has so many powerful scenes. You had a great cast. I placed Doctor Sleep as one of the best. I put it in my top 5 of Stephen King adaptation of all time.
Wow.
I've been a fan for more than 30 years. I just couldn't believe later on that it didn't perform well on the theaters, but it did very well on demand. I will talk about this on a couple of minutes. But talking about the changes you mentioned, I think you took remarkable risks on these adaptations, because I remember when I read the book, it was one of the very first time I was afraid that King will kill the main character. In this case, he will kill Danny. And later on, I thought he was going to kill Billy, his friend, Billy Freeman. And it was, I was relieved after I finished the book, saying, okay, King softened with the last year. And I know he softened after the accident, because if Doctor Sleep was written back in the 90s, he probably killed half of the characters without thinking it twice. Was it hard for you to make these changes? We all know that King doesn't feel very well about changes, but he was really happy about this. So I'm on the safe ground to ask you if it was hard to make these changes.
It was frightening. And for me, it wasn't so much that I wanted more people to die. I had a challenge of trying to whittle the story down so that I really felt strongly that it should just end with Dan, Abra, and Rose. And that meant, how do you solve the problem of Abra's father and of Billy and the other characters who King brought along for the ride, and while it worked for me in the novel, in the film, I felt like if you had that many people there for the final showdown, the intimacy of it, kind of went away. And with Billy, the other thing that struck me about the book, I completely agree with you that King has I think for the better softened since the accident.
We are more happy about it.
Yeah,
we don't like our characters to be killed.
Yeah, he writes such beautiful characters. You want to stay with them. I think one of the things that happened in Dr. Sleep, though, was, Bradley Trevor is killed and some members of the True Knot are killed, but nobody else. And it felt to me that the danger and the stakes weren't as high as they could be. And that we could escalate things on both sides by taking out characters who we otherwise would believe were safe. And I thought it paved the way for Dan to make the sacrifice that Jack makes in The Shining, And if he had Billy waiting for him, if he had this full and rich life waiting for him, I think I would have felt even worse that he dies in the fire. And I felt like it was a great chance to strip everything away until it was finally just about the passing of the torch between Dan and Abra. And it provided an opportunity for a reunion with Wendy and a healing with Wendy that I thought the seeds of that were in the book so beautifully. That he said he couldn't look at her in her final moments because of the death flies, and the chance, what I hoped for him, decades after the book ended, was that there would be that moment where the two of them would be face to face again, and it would be healed. And this was, I was like, we could do that right now, and we can do that. We can let it be the last image we see in a place that is so full of violence and insanity and misery, and to let the last thing that ever happens at the Overlook Hotel is a moment of healing. And that to me felt more in line.
I have chicken skin again. I know. I remember. I saw the movie December again. I saw the director's cut. That I love the movie, the one that hit the theaters, of course. But the director's cut, I think it's marvelous, and it was like the first time. It gives me the chills to remember those scenes. The magic in a completely horrible moment, the final moment with the two antagonists face to face, and that kind of redemption. I thought it was marvelous.
Oh, thank you. I'm very grateful.
Rebecca Ferguson mentioned that the famous scene with Jacob Tremblay only showed 5% of what was filmed, that it was way, way more brutal. Any details you can remember that you can share about the scene?
So the thing was, it wasn't that we did anything more or that we showed anything more explicit. It was just that Jacob, his performance of the death just went on much longer. And Jacob was the one driving that. Like he decided when he would die and how he behaved. I remember that night very, very well because it was Jacob Tremblay's 12th birthday.
Happy birthday! And your character will be killed.
Happy birthday! We had a cake for him on set that was in the shape of his baseball jersey, and so you could cut into the cake, and we thought we were really funny. We thought it was red velvet cake inside, and we thought, look how creepy and funny we are. And Jake, it was his first day on set, if I remember, and he'd been preparing that scene with his father for like a month. We'd never discussed it. We never rehearsed it. We never really saw what he was going to do. And I asked his dad, I said, how are you feeling about the scene? He said, he's going to be fine. He's got a great plan. I'm worried about you guys. And we all kind of laughed. And so we started with his close up. And the idea was always that the frame would never show the violence, that we'd just be on his face and everything else would happen out of frame. And I thought that would make it somehow less upsetting that we never saw anything. No. But it made it so much worse. And Jake, he just did that. We rolled on his close up and Rebecca showed up and everybody's full of swagger and, they're the monsters of the story. And Jake started screaming and crying and begging. And we had Bob Kurtzman's there with a paintbrush that he keeps dipping in fake blood. And he splashes it at Jake's chin along the way. And you see him just kind of going, leaning back from it. Rebecca completely got derailed. She's saying, she's trying to say her lines about how, pain purifies steam, but she's pain purifies the steam and we're gonna get you, and we're all at the monitor just horrified, and it goes on and it's endless. It's just they're not even doing anything anymore, and Jake's just he's screaming, he's crying, please no. And when I finally called cut, most of the true knot had left. Like Zahn McClarnon, Crow Daddy, was like 20 feet away and he was crying. And gosh. Rebecca was shaking, and like half the crew had abandoned their posts and just walked away. And I'm looking at Trevor Macy, my producer, and I'm just like, I don't know what to say. We can't. What have we done? and Jake hops up. He's covered with blood, and he hops off the ground, and he walks past his dad, who's just leaning against one of the RVs. And his dad holds his hand up, and Jake walks by and just high fives him, and then marched over to the craft service to get some candy. And we're all standing there just traumatized. And Rebecca walks up to me, and you can hear a pin drop on the set. Everyone's very quiet. It's like we're at a funeral. And Rebecca comes up and she says, "Wow." And I said, "Yeah, I had no idea there's going to be this horrible." And she thinks for a minute, and then she says, "There's no way that little shit is going to win this scene. Turn around and come with me, and it's my turn." And he never had to do it again. He'd already done it. And Rebecca then came in and roared through it. But yeah, it was the only scene that Stephen King also, when he first saw the film, he said, "I love the movie. I think you need to cut more of the baseball boy scene out. It's too disturbing."
How much did it last at first, the first cut?
I think if you watch it now, it goes on for about a minute. And I think the original cut was maybe 90 seconds.
All right.
So it to Rebecca's point, it felt like an eternity. It wasn't that much more. It was just every scream and every everything he did just it hit you like a fist.
It really got us. And I remember once it was announced, it was also mentioned that there were projects about a prequel of The Overlook and also a story focused on Dick Halloran's past. And well, sadly, Warner later on pulled the plug due to numbers. And you tweeted not that long ago that while the conversations were cooled down, time passed, and maybe the idea to give it a chance again is out there. After all, we have a Batman after George Clooney's one, so we can have any film after that one.
Well, nothing's. It hasn't come back around yet, and a lot of the people at Warner Brothers who I was working with then have moved on from the company. You know, Warner's has changed so much. I will always leave that door open if they're willing. You know, Warner Brothers owns the rights to all of that, so it's not a situation where if they don't make it, you know, we could take it somewhere else. We don't have that option. So it's really up to them. If they wanted to, I would be there in a heartbeat. And I think there's still room to tell more stories about the Overlook Hotel. I think that it'll always be fascinating. I would love the Dick Halloran movie that we were doing. I loved so much. I was so excited about that one. That's another that I would put down whenever I was working on, unless it was The Dark Tower, and come and do that. But you never know. I'd love to see. I told King I'd love to see more with Abra Stone. I think that's a character.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's so much you could do with her, and I said, if you write another Abra story, like, just please count me in. Like, I don't even need to see it. I will be there, and I know Kylie would come back in a heartbeat to play that character anytime. You know, I hope there's a chance, but as of today, there's no conversations at all about it. But you never know.
We can hope. Yeah. And now, yes, of course, I would love to talk about Revival and other projects you were involved with about King, but we have to go to the Dark Tower. We saw your comments before you announced you had the rights, that it was the ultimate work you would like to adapt from King, that it was your Everest, but it will also make you as happy as it could get, no? But were you one of the fans that read the books while they were being published, so we have to wait until the next one, and crossing the fingers that Steve, come on, return to Roland's World for once and all? Yeah.
No, it was agonizing waiting, and I remember when he was in the accident, you know, after the relief that he was okay, of realizing that, you know, that story might never be finished, and I was moving to Los Angeles a little more than 20 years ago, listening to the audiobook of Guns. And I stopped because Wolves was just published, and I was traveling across the country for, I think, 9 days. We were driving to make the move, and I made the whole group stop first thing on the day it was released at a bookstore at 9 a.m, so I could get my hardcover immediately. Then, you know, waiting for Song of Susanna and for The Dark Tower felt like an eternity. And then when I read The Dark Tower and finished crying, when I finally finished book 7 and felt like it was done and I'd never be in Midworld again.
It was devastating.
Then I remember how it felt when Wind Through the Keyhole was published, and when I opened that book and was suddenly back with the ka-tet, and I started crying again, and it was so beautiful to feel that it was over, and then have a couple, you know, with Little Sisters of Eloria. It was like to have these little ways back in, felt like such a gift. But yes, I've been a tower junkie for a very long time.
You gave us the news of the year a couple of weeks ago. A series, 5 seasons, maybe 2 movies. And some portal news mentioned it will be an Amazon series. I mean, because you recently moved from Netflix to Amazon, but you mentioned that the deal was closed before this, so you have the freedom to go to any streaming service you want.
Yes.
Do you have any news about this? Any progress that you can share? If you cannot share, it's perfect.
I can tell you that progress is being made. We've been working on it very hard. I don't have anything that I can share yet because I don't want to jinx anything. But we've been moving it forward at a good clip, and my priority is right now to put the right actors in it, and then to find the right home for it that isn't going to mess it up. And that's a very tough place to find. Like it's such a huge show, and it's so expensive, and I can understand why for a lot of places this is a very difficult decision to approach. So we've been doing our work trying to protect what the show is while making it as easy as possible for people to come on board and to support it, and trying to find the way that makes it the least frightening to a studio and a distributor. And it takes time. But I keep working on the scripts and, meeting with fantastic actors who are excited about it. So hopefully we'll have something we can announce soon.
I won't ask about names, but did you have the cast on your mind for the series? The main cast, I mean, I'm talking about the ka-tet.
Yeah, I have some people in mind, and I always have. And then there are people who over the years have expressed an enormous amount of interest in the project at various different incarnations of it. So I want to make sure I meet with them. And so there are some people though who had burrowed into my imagination early on as being perfect fits for some of these characters, and I'm lucky that I'm sitting down with a lot of them. So yeah.
Well, good luck. Good luck on that.
Yeah, we'll see.
You mentioned it will follow the order of the books, which I think is a great news. But I gotta ask, because with 5 seasons, it means that some of the seasons will have more than one book cover, right?
Yes.
Anything you can say about it? I'm asking a lot of questions that maybe you cannot say anything. Sorry.
I can say a little about that. So I don't think the Gunslinger stretches to a full season, and I was so eager. I think the Gunslinger, as written, makes a terrific movie. So it's perfect for like 2 episodes, and then you want to get to drawing of the 3. You want to get Eddie on the board. You want to get Susanna on the board. You want to have. There's no way to finish the first season without understanding the ka-tet, and even though Jake at the end of drawing of the 3 isn't there, how it all has to come together, and so that's one of the big decisions we made early was that the Gunslinger is our way in, but we need to get to the drawing of the 3 quickly. Yeah. And luckily the Gunslinger doesn't take up that much real estate as a story. It's fast and lean and mean and very simple. And that's the thing about it, and where I think, some of the other incarnations have maybe gone wrong is that it starts so perfectly small. It's the man in black fled across the desert and the Gunslinger followed. It's 2 people and one is chasing the other. It is so perfectly small. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and as big as the universe. But it walks you there one step and one person at a time. And that is, I think, the only way to approach the story. That's the only way. It's the reason King structured it the way he did. And it's the reason why audiences can grab onto a property like Game of Thrones, is that it was incremental. It turned its cards over one at a time. It didn't throw you into dragons and ice zombies. It walked you there a step at a time. And I think the Dark Tower does that by itself beautifully. Sometimes it's not broken and you don't have to fix it. You don't have to change it.
The guy knows. I mean, King knows. Yeah. 50 years career, a lot of films. One curious thing about this, I consider The Gunslinger. There are only 3 books of Stephen King that I consider that King is whispering to you instead of shouting them. One is The Gunslinger, the other one is Gerald's Game, and the third one is This Is Story. And you already made it, Gerald's Game. They are books that go on a lower and profound level. So I think, you're gonna crack it for the very first scene. Are there anything? Sorry,
I can tell you a little trivia. Most people don't know this. When I finished Gerald's Game, King asked what I wanted to do next, and I said Lisey's Story.
Oh,
that was the one I asked for, and he said, "I'm doing that myself." He was writing it himself. And I said, very well.
Very personal book for him.
Yep.
Very
so personal for him.
Yeah. Any things that you already know you'll have to leave out due to the cost of the project?
No, nothing on the cost yet. It's interesting. Some of the things that I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when they would say it's so expensive, that isn't what is scary. It's not the different environments of Midworld, because we've proven you can travel around the world and film amazing things, and you can do what the Mandalorian did and do this, virtual environment that's so seamless that you never question it. And a lot of the visual effects have become so incredible over the years that, like, it's not like a show can't afford to do, Shardik the Bear. It's more that what will knock a viewer out of the show versus make them lean further in.
Yeah.
And to what extent can fantastic elements be introduced while still keeping viewers who don't necessarily typically respond to fantastic storytelling engaged? And I think that's Game of Thrones did that brilliantly. And there are wonderful examples of it. So for me, it's about accessibility more than budget. There's nothing in there that I look at and say, I can't afford it.
Right.
We can prioritize things all over the place. It's really just about what does the best job of honoring the story and the source material while remaining accessible always for those viewers who haven't read the books. And that's a tough thing for fans of the book to hear, because we fans of the book want everything the way we saw it in our head to be up there, but that's the compromise, and that's I think the entire terrifying saga of the Dark Tower is finding that balance. It's so hard, but that's what I worry about more than budget.
All right. Last question, so I don't take you any more time. What is going to happen, or how do you work with those stories that are really deeply linked to the Dark Tower world, such as Black House, Insomnia, Rosnader, Earth in Atlantis, and now the last one is Wendy's Final Task. These have
and I mean, you really got to get Salem's Lot in there too.
Salem's Lot, of course, yeah.
But I mean, a huge deal. So yeah, the answer to that is you go to each individual rights holder one at a time, and you say please, and you explain why it all fits the way it fits and how it's important. And we've already done a fair amount of this work of finding out where the disparate rights are and who controls what and how we could work. Fortunately for me, I maintain a very good relationship with Warner Brothers, who controls at the moment Salem's Lot parts in Atlantis. Those are all Warner Brothers properties at the moment. And then the rest, we try to get what we need. And if we can't, part of the fun about being a constant reader is, okay, well, if I can't have this particular character, I know the King universe very well. Who else can I plug in that can achieve the same goal and still make the Stephen King fans very excited, but might also be a surprise. And so that's a lot of fun too, to say, okay, if I don't get Ted Brodigan in here, who else, what other incredible psychic character, what other breaker from the King world can turn the corner and have us go, oh my goodness. And I'm just throwing things out there, what about Dan Torrance? What about, Dick Halloran? It's characters that I already know and love who could fit into this story so beautifully without changing the mechanics and the intentions of it. So there's a lot of those conversations too. If we hit a roadblock, there are so many wonderful characters in the King universe that we won't hit a roadblock on all of them, So that's part of the fun. It's a giant puzzle, but it's really fun.
And Wind Through the Keyhole it will also be part of the adaptation, right? All right.
Wind Through the Keyhole, I think, is my favorite. And the way I would want to do it, we had this whole conversation about where do you put it, and for me, the experience I had of revisiting it like afterward, and that's why I think it's one of the movies. Like Wind Through the Keyhole, we do the whole story, and we get to those endings, right? And then afterward, heartbreaking endings, yeah. Yes, but we got to do both, right? So it's like we do all that, and then I think Wind Through the Keyhole is afterward. I think Wind Through the Keyhole comes along so that the movie gives you that feeling you had when you open the book and you're back.
Yes.
And that makes the story within Wind Through the Keyhole, which I think is such a gorgeous story.
Yeah.
It hits so much harder and is so much more resonant and beautiful after the journey, and that you then see them go proceed off into their fates, and the fate at that point. So watching them walk away from that at the end of Wind Through the Keyhole, I was a mess, and I think that's how you do the movie. You do it at the end. That's the last thing.
No, I concur with you. I mean, I think Wind Through the Keyhole, it was meant to be you reunite with these friends, this family you've been. You shared the journey for so much time, so many years. I mean, it was meant to reunite, not to be placed between the fourth and the fifth. That's a side story. So I really like this idea that you mentioned, that it would be one of the films after the series. Thank you very, very much, Mike. This was for me amazing.
Thank you. This is great. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Yeah, for me, it was an honor. The opportunity to go to LA and meet you and part of the cast and saw the film there in the theater was amazing. The party afterwards as well, and well, I really appreciate this a lot. We will share this interview edited with our followers, and I deeply hope. I wish tomorrow is my birthday, so I'm gonna wish that you make the Dark Tower it reach a good end and you can do it. So that will be one of my wishes.
Happy birthday!
Thank you, Mike.
And I'll tell you. So my early birthday present to you will be if the show goes into production, keep in touch with me and we'll have you come visit set, and you can come hang out for a couple of days on the shoot. So we'll do that.
Thank you very, very much. That would be amazing, priceless. I don't know. I know the words belong to King, not to me. He's the writer. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this and have the best of luck of this project. We are eagerly waiting for this, and I hope it gets made. I really hope you can
so
reach a good streaming and do the project exactly as you picture in your head. So far, all your projects were amazing. I don't think this will be an exception.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, and happy birthday again.
Thank you very much. Take care and have a great 2022.
All right, you too.
Bueno, ¿te gustó? ¿No te gustó? A nosotros esto fue una locura, quedamos re manija, re manija, y no podemos esperar más a que haya una noticia sobre que listo, la tiene tal streaming y arranca la producción ya mismo. En fin, nos estamos volviendo locos, queremos ver este proyecto de la Torre Oscura hacerse realidad. ¿Vos qué opinás? Pulgar arriba, pulgar abajo, nosotros estamos así, el del pie, el que quieras, no importa, todos los pulgares arriba, estamos muy pero muy entusiasmados. La realidad es que las dos cosas de King que hizo Mike Flanagan nos parece que estuvieron muy pero muy bien hechas, y bueno, obviamente no vamos a esperar menos de semejante proyecto. Lo de siempre, ¿te gustó este video? Compartilo, comentalo, like, en fin, suscríbete, toda la bola, vos ya sabes todo eso. Chao.